invited talk by Aleksandra Korolova. We're very delighted to have her here. So Aleksandra is an assistant professor of computer science at USC, and there she studies the societal impacts of algorithms and develops algorithms that allow us to have data-driven innovations and at the same time preserve privacy and fairness. Before that, she was a research scientist at Google, and she studied computer science, which she finished with a PhD at Stanford. She holds numerous awards, including the 2020 NSF Career Award and the 2011 PET Award for Outstanding Research in Privacy. So we are very glad to have her here. And Aleksandra, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much for the introduction and for inviting me to speak at the workshop. I've been an attendant for a number of years now, so it's exciting to be a speaker this time. Today, I'm going to talk about a particular domain, which is auditing ad delivery algorithms. And I'm going to talk about it not just for the findings of the societal challenges that we were able to uncover, but also with an eye towards what it means for where we need new privacy preserving research and new privacy enhancing technologies. And specifically, the reason I'm interested in auditing is that algorithms that are making consequential decisions about individuals are now everywhere. They're shaping what information people see. They're shaping communication. And more often than not, many of the algorithms and machine learning algorithms are designed by for-profit corporations with little or no transparency. And I think it's important for us as a society to be able to understand what impact the specific algorithms may have on individuals' experiences and also on groups' experiences and our experiences as a society. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to use a particular type of algorithm, which is the ad delivery algorithm, as an example to study these kind of societal implications. And specifically, I'm going to look at what role ad delivery algorithms play for potential discrimination in job ad delivery. What role do they play for political discourse? And use that as an example of what is needed in some cases in order to do black box auditing of the ad systems. And based on these examples, based on this case study, I will conclude by discussing the future research implications for algorithm auditing and also specifically for privacy preserving technologies. So first of all, why ad delivery? Why focus on this particular aspect? One aspect is that one can view advertising as something that shapes access to opportunities. So if we think of advertising as a vehicle where people get their information, if you're not getting the same information as everybody else, or you're getting a slightly different take, then you have different access to opportunities. And another reason to study advertising algorithms is that in many ways they are similar to those algorithms controlling recommendations and rankings and so forth. It's the same principles that are at play. And the final reason to study specifically advertising algorithms is that this is an area where the platforms designing those algorithms may not be in the best position to keep the societal desiderata at mind and self-police. Because very often also the financial goals are at stake. And therefore, this is an area where third parties and public interest researchers and perhaps regulators should have a different view and not just rely on self-report for the platforms. And when I talk about ad delivery, let me first talk about the overall advertising process on the web. So it consists of really two phases. The first phase is under the control of the advertiser. It's the part where the advertiser comes up with an ad creative, the image and the link and the text that will appear in their ad. And they also select a target audience. So the people who they would like the ad to reach. And then finally, they specify what is their goal with the advertising campaign. Are they interested in maximizing their reach, maximizing traffic, some sort of measure of conversions and so forth, and how much money are they willing to spend on the campaign? Now, once the advertisers have specified their part, that's where ad delivery algorithms comes in. So for any particular user, there may be multiple advertisers who are bidding, who are targeting and bidding to reach this user. And so what the ad delivery algorithm does is, among the advertisers who are trying to reach this user, it selects the winning advertiser. And moreover, it then determines the price that will be charged to the winning advertiser. And this part is very algorithmic in the sense that the platform such as Facebook in our study is trying to optimize multiple objectives. It's trying to make sure that users see relevant ads. It's trying to make sure that advertisers reach who they want. It's trying to make sure that everybody has a good experience and so forth. And but this algorithm right now is very opaque, and that's where the opacity of this algorithm and the optimization objectives that are being chosen as part of this algorithm could perhaps lead to undesirable societal consequences. And that's the part that we really want to study, which is what role does the ad delivery algorithm, as opposed to the advertiser choices, plays on who gets to see which ads. So our first goal is really to understand what is the role of ad delivery algorithm for job ad dissemination. And to just illustrate that and the reason we are looking at job ads specifically is this motivation that, again, advertising is moderating the exposure to opportunities. And specifically for employment, this is the kind of opportunities where we want to make sure, and the US law wants to make sure that the exposure is non-discriminatory based on characteristics such as age, race, or gender. And the reason that it's hard to really directly understand what is the role of the ad delivery algorithm is that if you simply run a job ad without gender specification for a software engineer, and then you observe that mostly the resulting clicks are from white men, then you don't really know what's causing that, right? So suppose I just ran a campaign and I got clicks only from white men, right? Let's focus on the gender aspect of it. One reason that I may be getting clicks from only men, it could be that just more men use Facebook than women. And so, of course, my ad is shown to more men, and therefore men are more likely to click. Another reason could be economic. It could be that women are more expensive to reach because there are many more advertisers competing for them. And therefore my ad is being shown mostly to men due to economic reasons. It also could be that the ad is being shown equally to both genders, but only men engage with it, and both implicitly and explicitly. And that's why I'm seeing the clicks only for them. So it's hard to say a priori what is playing the role. Is it the ad delivery algorithm that is showing my ad in a biased manner, or is it some of these other factors? And similarly, if you want to study why, let's say, only white men are clicking, it could be because just more white men use Facebook, or it could be because Black men are more expensive to reach, or it could be that, again, the ad is shown equally to men of both races, but only white men engage with the ad. So the question we want to really study is, are these all these other factors at play, or is it the ad delivery algorithm that is actively favoring the white men? And the tools that we have to study this, unless we want to directly go and study it from inside the platform, if we want to study it outside the platform, then the tools that we have are really limited, right? What we can do is we can act like a real advertiser, so we can run our own advertising campaigns, and we can design these campaigns in such a way that they control for variables that may be influencing ad delivery. Then, as any advertiser, we can have some control over targeting, such as using custom audiences where one can upload a list of email addresses or a list of names of people that one wants to reach. And then, as any regular advertiser, we have access to campaign performance reports. So breakdown of impressions and clicks by age, gender, and location. So really by zip code or DMA. So those are the tools that we have. But notice here that we have the breakdown by age, gender, and location, but that's all we have. So if we want to study, say, delivery by race, it's not immediately possible. So this is where we start to need additional data and additional workarounds to figure out how to measure potential skew in delivery by race. So as I mentioned, Facebook doesn't report delivery statistics broken up by race, but they do report the delivery statistics broken down by location. And our trick is to bring in voter records. For example, North Carolina has publicly available voter records that contain names, addresses, gender, self-identified race, and also age of voters. And what we can do is we can create custom audiences with a one-to-one correspondence between race and location. So for example, we can create one custom audience with, say, voters from Wilmington who are white, and another custom audience with voters from some other town in North Carolina who are Black. And then merge these two audiences into one custom audience, and then use it in ad targeting. And when we receive campaign performance reports with the location data of who was shown the ad, then the location corresponds to the race of the recipient, because that's how we created the custom audiences. So that's a trick to use the location data to measure racial delivery. So once we have that trick in place, we can ask the following question. We can say, well, are different ads delivered differently based on their content? And what we do to control for all the other variables, such as the economics and the possibly different use by gender or by race on the platform, is we run simultaneous ads that target the same balanced audience at the same time with the same bid. So the only difference in the ads is really the type of job they are advertising. And so we can say that, well, if we see that the delivery is skewed by race or gender, then that skew can only be attributed to the ad delivery algorithm, to what the platform is doing. And so this is exactly the experiment that we ran. We ran ads for a lumberjack job and for a janitorial cleaner or housekeeper at the same time with the same budget. And what we observed is really this skewed delivery. So the lumberjack job went to a predominantly male and predominantly white audience, and the cleaner job went to a predominantly female, predominantly Black audience. So again, everything else between the ads is the same. The only difference is essentially the picture and the text of what's being advertised, but the delivery is very skewed by gender and very skewed by race. This is enough to claim that the ad delivery algorithm is skewed, but it's not enough to say whether it's discriminatory or not, because there could be another reason that this skew appears, and really this reason is qualifications. So it could be that simply the different people were differently qualified for these jobs, and the skew is due to the differences in qualifications among the different demographics. And if that is indeed the case, then it's an acceptable source of skew per US law, because it would be justified by occupational qualifications. So what we need in order to control for qualifications is really another trick or another way to account for potential differences in qualifications among the demographic groups. And here's how we do it. Here's our approach. What we do is we find a pair of job positions that have similar qualification requirements, but de facto gender skew in the real world. So for example, in order to be a delivery driver for Dominas, which is a pizza company, and in order to be a delivery driver for Instacart, which is a grocery shopping service, really the qualifications are the same. But what happens in real life is that most of Domino's drivers are male and most of Instacart drivers are female. So this is an example of a job where qualifications are the same, but there is a de facto gender skew in the real world. And then what we can do is we can run ads for these two positions, again, at the same time, targeting the same audience and using a gender balanced audience. And then we can measure whether there's a relative difference in the delivery by gender for these two ads. And if we see that there is a relative difference in the delivery by gender, then we can rule out qualification as a source of existing skew in delivery, because we controlled for the qualifications. The qualifications are similar. This is exactly what we do, but notice how here, in order to do this kind of experiment, we need another source of data, right? We need to know that Dominas and Instacart have similar qualifications, but different de facto gender distribution. So it's another source of potentially private data that we need to be finding somewhere. We ran these experiments, and this time we did it both on Facebook and on LinkedIn. What we found is that on Facebook, it is the skew continues. So the Instacart ad that has de facto more women drivers is shown to a statistically significant higher proportion of women than the Domino's ad, even though everything else is the same on Facebook. And we find no such skew on LinkedIn. And then we repeat this for several other types of jobs. So in addition to the delivery driver, we find that two companies that have de facto skew in gender in software engineering roles, specifically Netflix has more women in software engineering jobs than NVIDIA. And we repeat the experiment on both platforms with these two jobs. And again, we find the same result, that Facebook's delivery is skewed according to gender, while LinkedIn's delivery is not. And then we do the same also for a sales job, where we use a jewelry company that has more women in sales than a particular automotive company. So in summary, right, what we find is that for gender, we can control for qualifications using these additional data sources. But that's for gender. If we want to do the same thing for race, we can do it in theory, in the sense that the methodology, the idea of finding a pair of job positions that has similar qualifications but de facto racial skew in the real world is sound. But actually, we can't do it in practice without more data. Because again, our data by race is already limited to North Carolina. And now to find two jobs in North Carolina about whom we know that there is a de facto racial skew is difficult. So we have a significant limitation of kind of how deep we can go with auditing without additional data. I can see that there is a question in the chat, so maybe you can ask it, because I can't see the actual question.
It's not a question. It was just a prompt for people to add questions.
Oh, okay, no problem. Thanks. Okay, so we can do it with more data, and moreover, when we studied the LinkedIn platform, unlike Facebook that reports the gender statistics, they don't even report the gender statistics of delivery. So on LinkedIn, we have to do the location trick, not just for a study for race, but also for the study of gender skew. And moreover, the LinkedIn's reporting statistics are thresholded for privacy. So they don't report statistics for geographic areas unless there is a certain number of people there. So up to 30% of the actual data is missing due to the privacy protections that LinkedIn puts in place. So In other words, one of the reasons that we didn't find a skew on LinkedIn could be that really their ad delivery algorithm is less biased than Facebook's. But another reason could be is that really our workarounds and our tricks to measure things and protections due to privacy are decreasing the amount of data we can really work with, and therefore decreasing our ability to reach statistically significant conclusions. So to summarize this part, what we found is proof of ad platform's role in discriminatory job ad delivery. We found an example where studying discrimination by a particular attribute is possible in theory using our methodology, but hard in practice because there simply isn't any public data that we can rely on to construct these kinds of campaigns. And I think this is a good demonstration that there's a difficulty of doing black box auditing without an additional transparency, either from the platform or additional data sources that are suitable for custom audience creation or suitable for creation of various tricks that can control for various parameters that we need to be able to control for in order to get to the bottom of what the algorithm is doing, as opposed to what other forces may be in play. And now, similarly, I'm going to give you a brief overview of how we study the role of ad delivery algorithms for political discourse, and again, the tricks and the implications we have there. And the tools we have are very similar. So we're registering as a political advertiser, which carries an additional burden of providing quarterly reports of every advertising campaign we run to the Federal Elections Commission. And in addition to the voter registration data and location data, what we're going to use is something that Facebook exposes to advertisers, which are the additional targeting criteria by specific behaviors. So on Facebook, you can say that I want to reach users whose behavior is likely engagement with US political content liberal, or whose interest is Democratic Party, or whose interest is make America great again, and so forth. And again, we have the campaign performance reports, the impression and click breakdown by age, gender, and location. And what we do here is we ask the question of whether ad platforms deliver ads differently based on their content. And we run 3 different ads, one for Donald Trump, another one for Bernie Sanders, and a third one, a neutral register to vote ad. And then using the same location and voter record trick, we want to see whether these ads are delivered to different groups based on their political leaning. And what we find is that when we run ads to a balanced audience at the same time from the same account with the same budget, that ad platform delivers ads to users who they already think are in agreement with the campaign content. So the Sanders ad goes to mostly Democratic audience. The Trump ad goes to mostly Republican audience. And the neutral ad gets delivered about 50-50. And then we want to ask the question of whether the ad campaigns themselves, the political campaigns themselves, can overcome this unwanted or sometimes unwanted steering by using the targeting features that the platform provides. So we explicitly, for each campaign, we target either a liberal or a conservative audience. and then everything else is the same. So we run 2 ads for each campaign for a total of 4 ads. And what we find is that even in this case, ads deliver more to users if they share, or if in Facebook's belief, they share the campaign's views. Really the Sanders ad goes to reaches many more liberal audience users than conservative audience users, even though the Sanders ad is trying to target both groups equally. And likewise for Trump. And in addition to delivering to more users, there's also a cost penalty. So it costs more to reach the users who don't share the campaign's views by a factor of as much as 2 or 3. And what this means is really that Facebook's political ad delivery is echo chamber-like. So even if politicians from both sides of the aisle are trying to reach a particular user, Facebook tends to show those ads that already agree with the user's viewpoint. And moreover, there's an economic thing at play where Facebook non-transparently puts a thumb on the scale of how much it costs for a particular candidate to reach the same user. And finally, in the context of micro-targeting debate that has been going on for the last couple of years, where there's been a big push to disable campaigns' ability to micro-target on these online platforms in favor of privacy and transparency, it turns out that disabling micro-targeting would effectively give platforms more control over the distribution of political messages. So yes, it would perhaps give more privacy and transparency, but would have another potentially undesirable societal consequence. And then again, here, this case study illustrates that auditing requires additional data or reliance on platforms' inferences about individuals that are made available to advertisers in order to do any kind of meaningful study. So in conclusion, there's kind of 3 types of auditing approaches that are popular today, specifically for advertising. The approach that I presented today, which is acting as an advertiser, and this approach requires rich data access and access to a lot of potentially private information. Other approaches that are currently being discussed are through crowdsourcing. And this approach also has the requirement of the user who would be participating in this crowdsourcing study through an auditor to trust this auditor with their private data. And finally, the third approach that is popular is through creation of stock puppet accounts. And that one doesn't have the privacy challenges, but it has other challenges, such as creation of such accounts violates, in many cases, the terms of service, and also is not representative, as doesn't contain the same amount of information as typical accounts. So that leaves me with where I started. I think in order to be able to do algorithm auditing, we need new privacy preserving techniques that would really enable auditing that is independent, representative, respects individual privacy, and respects companies' business interests. And that's where I think a lot of interesting questions lie for this audience. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks a lot for that for that talk. Very insightful. So we have one question by Peter, who doesn't have a microphone currently, so I'm going to read it. And what he's asking is, so did you rule out the fact that the skew in the job ads could be just due to the fact that the ad model learns that gender X might have a preference for a job Y? So
yeah. Thanks for the question. I did not present this experiment here, but it is in one of our papers. We did rule out that fact by running ads that are that look like blank squares to people and look like full of content ads to the machine learning algorithms of Facebook, and demonstrating that these results hold even when the ads look like blank squares to people. So it's driven by the algorithm and not by the individual preference for the actual ad at play.
Okay, thanks. And then we have a second question by Aurélien, who I think has a microphone.
Yes, thanks a lot for the talk. So I was this may be like a detailed question, but I was kind of surprised by the result of this experiment for the Dominos versus this other delivery company experiment, where essentially this de facto gender skew of the real world, which seems not so trivial to know. I mean, you mentioned yourself that it might require auxiliary knowledge to actually know that. The fact that it is found in the ad delivery system. So I was wondering whether you have any hypothesis to explain this. A tempting one maybe is that the ad system is trained on employee or candidate data from these specific companies, which could make it possible for it to learn this specific skew. But yeah, I was curious about that.
Thanks. That's a really great question. And I agree with your hypothesis. I think it's possible that the skew is coming from being trained on specific employee data for these specific companies. But our point is that that is not something that should be happening, because just because there's a skew right now, it doesn't mean that the ad delivery algorithm should be propagating this kind of skew, especially without specific advertiser direction to that. So this is really an example of where if the skew is being reproduced, this is exactly a discriminatory algorithm where the skew should not be reproduced.
Sure, I totally agree with that. Okay, thanks a lot.
We have another question by Hui.
Yeah, I have a question. Is when we design a fair algorithm, right? We need to use users' sensitive information, such as their gender, their race, like this information. But how to do individual privacy protection in this case?
I think that's exactly my point. That I think we need to figure out how to do individual privacy protection and figure out how to use the techniques that the attendees of this workshop specifically are experts in order to be able to enable the kind of public interest audits while preserving individual privacy. Yeah. So yes, this is the question back to this audience. How do we do something like this? And I think we have enough tools to do this already, in just a matter of figuring out what are the specifics for auditing that need to go in play.
Okay, thank you.
And then Adrio has another question.
Yeah, I guess my question is related.
I think we have them since we started.
My question is related to what would you audit if you could audit, and in particular, how do you take into account the skew that is introduced by the bidding process, right? It's not clear. So it's not clear to me what does it mean exactly to introduce a skew, right? Because it could happen as a result of skewing what's presented or how these auctions are formed, or it could itself be introduced by the dynamics of a well-defined auction, right? So how would you go about kind of checking for that if you had access to the system?
No, if you have access to the system, right, then you also have access to the optimization objectives that are being run, and then you can do different kinds of studies than when you don't have access to the system, right? Like if you know more, you can analyze more, right? So right now, I think without better access, it is really tricky to separate the skew between the bidding process and other types of skew. But one can argue that right now the ad platforms are kind of doing everything. They are bidding on behalf of the advertiser. So the advertiser typically specifies an overall budget, and then the ad platform is the one that's deciding how to bid in any particular auction on behalf of the advertiser. They're determining the so-called relevance scores, or how relevant the ad could be to a particular user, and therefore discounting the bid according to the relevance scores. And they're also determining the price. So one can view everything the platform does as the ad delivery algorithm that encompasses all of these different things. And so in some sense, it's not important which of these parts specifically introduces the skew or introduces discrimination, because all of these parts are controlled by the platform. So then once we know that there is discrimination introduced, it's up to the platform to then internally go and figure out which part contributes and how to address it.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the talk.
Thanks for the wonderful questions.
Yeah, thanks again.